I mentioned this story that the Dartmouth men's basketball team has voted to unionize, and we always try to push a story forward. Like, what's it mean? Like, what's the real fallout that this could mean for sports, and not necessarily football and basketball, but maybe the smaller sports, the ones that don't produce revenue here. Ross Dellenger does a great job covering college sports, certainly college football. Yahoo Sports senior writer. All right, help me understand, help the audience understand. What does this mean that Dartmouth is trying to unionize or going to try to unionize? What's it mean for college sports?
Yes, everybody wants to know, right? How does this impact all other college programs? Dan, it could be a while till we know. Right now there's an appeal from Dartmouth. It's an appeals process to the National Labor Relations Board national office in Washington, D.C. And if the appeal is upheld there, it'll probably be further appealed to federal courts. And then from there, Dan, could go to the Supreme Court. So it could be a while before we have some finality. In the meantime, the fact that a local NLRB region office deemed Dartmouth men's basketball players employees is somewhat historic and could have ramifications in the way that other players at other programs, certainly programs that make more money, right, than the Dartmouth men's basketball team, which loses hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, those players could see what Dartmouth did, right, and they could do it themselves, right? They could get together themselves and unionize collectively. So that is certainly maybe in the immediate, what we could see is more movement in college programs like this. But as far as some kind of like national edict of players or employees, it could be a while until we see that from the courts.
Because this is going to be pushed further and further and further away, like Maurice Claret was trying to come out. And by the time that was going to be heard, he was going to already be in the NFL. Northwestern, when they tried to unionize. So I don't know if Dartmouth is saying, look, this isn't going to affect us, but it could affect generations of college athletics, college athletes here. And what do you get if you would happen to be unionized in college athletics?
Well, you conceivably you'd get collective bargaining, right? So, as a union, as a group of players, you would be able to bargain with your school, the employer, potentially, according to the ruling at the Boston NLRB office. So you could collectively bargain, and a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders, Dan, in college athletics, whether it be coaches, even administrators, maybe even some commissioners, have come out publicly saying that the fix to all of this, right, all of the problem that college football and basketball specifically are having, the money issue, is to collectively bargain with some kind of players association. And that's what we're heading around down, right? It's a path toward uh, a school or a conference or even a national organization like the NCAA bargaining compensation in terms and benefits with a group of athletes. College football and basketball to an extent, but especially major college football has become such a big moneymaker that we're in this position where you're gonna start having unions or players associations for players to get direct compensation. And I think a lot of people, even when in, like I said, college athletics, thinks that's kind of the answer.
Okay, but this is Dartmouth. I don't believe they give scholarships. Like I'm just curious that it's Dartmouth, it's a private school, it's Ivy League, it's not revenue producing. Why Dartmouth?
Yeah, great question, and it's interesting because the appeal from Dartmouth. I was reading through the documents of the appeal, and one of the things they argue is, of all the places that you would choose to make employees, you choose us. Obviously the players got together and did this there, but they are probably not a great example of a athletic department and a team that should be deemed employees, right? They lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe upwards of $1 million every year. The men's basketball team there does, just like a lot of men's basketball teams, especially in the Ivy League. They don't offer scholarships, like you said. In their appeal, at least, they say that there are no real extra benefits. There are no academic type of concessions made for the enrollment of basketball players. So why us is kind of what they argued in the appeal, and they certainly have a point, right? You can point to the Michigan football team, the Duke basketball team, right, and say why aren't those groups named employees? Why would you deem our group employees? We don't check off a lot of the employment boxes. But what what the Dartmouth men's basketball team in the union argued is that Dartmouth athletic department and coaches have, quote, control over the men's basketball team and the athletes. They set the schedules, they penalize players for not showing up, they demand you be at practice. That's kind of what they use. But Dan, to back to your point, if the Dartmouth men's basketball team was deemed employees, as they were and as they might by the national board in the courts, then every college team in the country probably could be deemed employees.
Well, then, if you're an employee, now I'm going to make sure that you put basketball ahead of academics because that's going to be important for me. Like, you're not a student, you're an employee, and you're employed because you're a good basketball player. So I don't know. There's a lot to work out here. A lot of gray area.
It is. It's complex. It's a complicated issue. It's challenging kind of to get your mind around it. But I think the gist is college athletics as, quote, amateurs right now, even though we all know right through NIL, they're getting a lot. They're getting a decent amount of money, especially at the highest level from booster collectives. But in the way they're still considered amateur athletes, and they're getting quite a bit of benefits because of that, whether that's the training table, the dining hall, you name it, for private flights to games, things like that. They are getting a lot of benefits. And you wonder, Dan, when they all are, quote, employees, if when that does happen, those benefits, how many of them will go away? And then you start talking about, as you mentioned off the top, the Olympic sports. What happens to the Olympic sports programs at these schools that don't make revenue, a lot of revenue, and certainly don't turn a profit at all, kind of like Dartmouth men's basketball? How does Dartmouth, right? How do they pay athletes on a team that loses whatever $500,000-$800,000 a year? Where do they come up with the funds to do it? A lot of administrators are asking the same thing when it comes to the Olympic sports at these power programs that rely on football profit and men's basketball profit to subsidize them. So that's certainly a key issue. The one thing athlete advocates will say, right, is, well, you can cut the coach's salary, football coach and basketball coaches' salaries, and then you can pay your Olympic sports.
Good to talk to you, Ross. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports senior writer covering college football.